The sun dipped low over Red Mesa, painting the cracked asphalt in shades of blood and gold. Inside the weathered walls of Haven House, a foster home clinging to the town's forgotten edge, 12 children huddled in the dim light of a single bulb. The oldest, a girl of 14 named Lila, clutched a frayed stuffed bear to her chest, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that doesn't scream. It whispers, the younger ones pressed against her, their small hands gripping plastic bags stuffed with the only belongings they owned, a toothbrush, a crumpled drawing, a single sock. Outside, the low rumble of engines grew, but not the friendly kind. Trucks with tinted windows idled like predators, and men in crisp windbreakers, badges glinting under the fading light, formed a loose perimeter. A deputy leaned against his cruiser, arms crossed, his gaze sliding away from the windows where tiny faces peered out. Marlene Price, the foster director, stood at the door, her hands trembling as she gripped a thick folder of reports. At 58, she'd seen too many sunsets like this one, but none that twisted her gut so deep. "You can't just take them," she said, her voice steady but edged with desperation. The lead agent, a man with a jaw like carved stone, didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Orders from up top, ma'am. Relocation for safety. Sign here." Safety. The word hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Marlene knew better. These kids weren't runaways or troublemakers. They were witnesses, silent observers to a late-night delivery gone wrong at the old warehouse 2 miles down the road. Trucks unloading crates under cover of darkness, men shouting about loose ends, and a scuffle that left echoes in the night. The children had been playing in the yard, hidden behind the fence. They'd seen faces, heard names. And now the system was moving to scatter them like leaves in the wind before anyone could listen. The first tear slipped down Lila's cheek as the door creaked open. A boy of 8 buried his face in her side, whispering, "They're gonna split us up." The air inside smelled of stale bread and fear sweat, the kind that clings to clothes and memories. Marlene's folder shook in her hands. Pages of ignored complaints, calls to child services that vanished into bureaucracy, pleas for protection that bounced back unanswered. She'd fought for months, piecing together what the kids had confided in fragments. Shadows in the night, the glint of something metallic, a man's plea cut short. But the reports had been buried, labeled unsubstantiated. Now, with the trucks blocking the drive and the windbreakers closing in, it felt like the end of everything she'd built in this dusty corner of nowhere. Miles away, on a ribbon of highway cutting through the desert, Tom "Hawk" Daniels throttled his Harley, the engine's growl a steady companion to his thoughts. At 46, Hawk carried the weight of old wars in his scarred knuckles and the faint tremor in his left hand, a souvenir from a medic's tent in a forgotten conflict. He rode with iron promise, a crew bound not by blood, but by oaths whispered over campfires and chrome. The call had come at dusk, jolting him from a rare moment of peace at the clubhouse. Rourke, an old combat medic with a voice like gravel over glass, had been terse. "Hawk, it's the foster home on Red Mesa. They're circling it like vultures. Kids inside. Good ones. Marlene's holding the line, but she won't last. You remember what we promised?" Hawk did. 20 years back, in the choking dust of a battlefield, he'd lost a brother-in-arms to a stray round. As the man bled out, his last words had been a vow extracted from Hawk. "If you ever see the powerless being erased, brother, you don't look away. You stand." Hawk had carried that like a brand, a promise etched into his soul. He'd buried it under miles of road and the rhythm of the club, but Rourke's call dragged it back, sharp as a knife. He twisted the throttle, the wind whipping his salt and pepper beard, the scent of hot rubber and sagebrush filling his lungs. Behind him, the Iron Promise convoy assembled, 50 riders strong, engines sinking like a heartbeat. No weapons drawn, no aggression in their stance, just presence, steel and patience against the machine. As the sun vanished, casting long shadows over the mesa, the bikers crested the rise. The foster home came into view, a squat building ringed by authorities' cold efficiency. Trucks formed a barrier, windbreakers shifting uneasily as the roar of Harleys drowned the evening quiet. Hawk pulled to the front, killing his engine with a deliberate cough. The deputy straightened, hand hovering near his holster, but Hawk dismounted slow, boots crunching on gravel. His leather vest, patched with the Iron Promise emblem, a fist clutching a broken chain, caught the last light. "Evening," Hawk said, voice low and even, like thunder rolling distant. The agent stepped forward, clipboard forgotten. "This is official business. Private property. Move along." Hawk's eyes, steel grey and unyielding, flicked to the windows. He saw the faces, the girl with the bear, the boy hiding. "Looks like a roundup to me," he replied, not raising his voice. "Kids don't belong in the scatter." Behind him, the convoy fanned out, forming a ring around the perimeter. Engines idled low, a vibration that hummed through the ground, holding back the storm. No one revved or postured. It was a wall of quiet resolve, chrome gleaming like shields at dawn. Marlene appeared at the door, folder clutched like a shield, her eyes meeting Hawk's. Gratitude flickered there, mixed with the fire of someone who'd fight to her last breath. The agent barked into a radio, but the response crackled uncertain. Backup delayed, questions rising. Inside, Lila peeked through the curtain, the rumble outside shifting something in her chest. For the first time that evening, hope flickered amid the fear. Hawk stood firm, the promise from a dying friend pulsing in his veins. This wasn't about bikes or brawls. It was about the erased finding their voice, the powerless drawing a line in the dust. As stars pricked the sky, the standoff stretched, engines purring like guardians in the night. Red Mesa had seen its share of sunsets, but this one promised a dawn where justice might finally ride in. The convoy's arrival sent ripples through the tense air, Marlene's shoulders easing just a fraction as Hawk nodded toward the door. "Let us in," he said to the agent, his tone leaving no room for debate. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to witness." The windbreakers exchanged glances, the deputy's radio buzzing with uncertainty. One by one, the kids inside began to whisper, the plastic bags loosening in their grips. Rourke pulled up beside Hawk, his medic's bag slung over his shoulder, eyes scanning the scene with the precision of old battlefields. "They're scared, Hawk, but they saw it all, the trucks, the argument. If we hold, someone listens." Hawk placed a hand on the agent's arm, gentle but immovable. "These aren't criminals. They're the ones who need protecting." The words hung, a challenge wrapped in calm. The perimeter tightened, but so did the ring of bikers, 50 souls, bound by more than road dust. In that moment, under the vast desert sky, a forgotten promise began to rewrite the night. The desert night settled over Red Mesa like a heavy blanket, stars wheeling overhead in silent judgment. Hawk's boots ground into the gravel as he faced the agent, the air thick with the scent of cooling engines and distant creosote bushes. The windbreakers shifted, their hands twitching toward radios, but the Iron Promise riders held their line. 50 Harleys forming an unbroken circle, headlights cutting through the dark like accusatory beams. No one revved or shouted. It was a vigil, engines idling in low harmony, a rumble that vibrated through Marlene's thin walls and into the bones of the children inside. Marlene stepped forward, her folder pressed against her chest like armor. "These kids aren't going anywhere without a fight," she said, her voice cracking the tension. The agent sneered, but his eyes darted to the bikers, calculating. "This is relocation protocol. Child Services has jurisdiction." Hawk met his gaze, unblinking. "Protocol don't erase what they saw. Let me talk to her, the director. Or are you afraid of words?" The deputy coughed, stepping closer, but Rourke dismounted beside Hawk, his old medic's instincts kicking in. "Easy, officer. We're veterans. Seen enough shadows to know when one's hiding something rotten." Inside, the room felt smaller, the single bulb casting long shadows that danced with the kids' whispers. Lila rocked the youngest, a girl of 5 named Sophie, whose plastic bag held only a locket with a faded photo. "They won't let them take us, right?" Sophie murmured, her voice a thread in the quiet. Lila nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. She'd been the first to spot the trucks that night, 2 weeks ago, under a moonless sky. She'd snuck out to the fence with the others, chasing fireflies that weren't there. Instead, they'd heard the gravel crunch, seen silhouettes unloading boxes from unmarked vans. A man's voice had risen, sharp and desperate. "You can't bury this. Those kids heard everything." Then a thud, a silence that swallowed the night. The next day, rumors swirled in the home, something bad at the warehouse, tied to the big shots in town who owned half the mesa. Marlene had pieced it together from their halting stories. Deliveries that smelled wrong, like chemicals and fear, not the aid supplies the town whispered about. She'd filed reports, called lines that rang into voids. "They're witnesses to corruption," she told Hawk through the cracked door, her eyes red-rimmed. "The warehouse, it's a front for smuggling, maybe worse. Those men argued and won." He didn't walk away. The kids saw faces, badges even. Now they're silencing them by splitting the home. Hawk absorbed it, the old promise from his dying friend echoing, "Stand for the erased." In the war, he'd watched medics like Rourke patch up the forgotten, only for brass to rewrite the reports. This felt the same, power chewing up the small to protect the guilty. The agent barked orders, 2 windbreakers advancing toward the door. "Open up, now." But the bikers moved as one, not aggressive, just present, forming a human chain, vests creaking, beards catching the starlight. One rider, a burly ex-firefighter named Jax, knelt by his bike, pulling a thermos from his saddlebag. "Coffee, ma'am?" he offered Marlene, his voice a low anchor. She took it, hands shaking, and for a moment the perimeter faltered. Rourke slipped inside with Hawk's nod, his medic bag thumping softly. The kids recoiled at first, but his calm eyes, scarred from shrapnel and loss, eased them. "I'm Rourke. Fixed up, boys, like your big man out there in worse spots? You tell me what's got you holding so tight?" Lila hesitated, then spoke, words tumbling like stones down a dry wash. "We saw the trucks, men with lights on their chests, like stars, but mean. One yelled about kids hearing too much, then quiet, like the wind stopped." Sophie clutched her locket, whispering, "He said protect the little ones, but they took him." Rourke's jaw tightened. He'd bandaged enough silenced voices in his time. Outside, Hawk faced the deputy alone. "You know this stinks. Kids don't vanish for safety. What's your cut in this?" The deputy flushed, glancing at the trucks. "Just following orders. Town council says the home's unstable. Budget cuts." Lies. Thin as desert air. Hawk leaned in, voice a gravel whisper. "Orders from who? The same ones running crates at midnight?" Tension coiled tighter, radios crackling with distant voices, reinforcements en route, but the bikers' presence bought time. Marlene emerged with Rourke, folder extended to Hawk. "These are my filings, dates, names, everything the kids shared. If it gets out..." A windbreaker lunged for it, but Jax blocked him, broad shoulders a wall. "Touch that and you're touching all of us." The agent radioed frantically. "We need backup. Bikers everywhere." But the convoy's engines purred on, a symphony of restraint. Hawk flipped through the pages under flashlight glow. Reports of ignored calls, a pattern of buried complaints leading to the mayor's office. Whispers of private security tied to the warehouse owners. As midnight edged closer, a pickup rattled up the drive, headlights slicing the dark. Not authorities. A local journalist, Elena Vargas, drawn by Marlene's desperate voicemail. She parked amid the bikes, notebook in hand, eyes widening at the scene. "What the hell's going on?" Hawk nodded her toward Marlene. "Truth's inside. Kids saw corruption, systems covering it." Elena slipped past the line, the windbreakers protesting but outmaneuvered. Inside, she knelt by Lila, voice soft. "Tell me. I'm listening." The girl's words spilled, fragments of that night weaving into a tapestry of shadows, crates stamped with false labels, a scuffle leaving traces of struggle, a man's final plea for the innocent. Outside, the standoff held, the iron promise a fortress of leather and loyalty. Hawk felt the tremor in his hand fade, replaced by the steady pulse of purpose. This was redemption's edge, not fists, but fortitude. Rourke joined him, eyes on the horizon where dawn hinted. "They're buying time, Hawk, but if we break the circle—" No need to finish. The promise bound them. A chain stronger than any the emblem broke. As Elena's questions pierced the night, the foster home glowed faintly, a beacon against the encroaching dark. Red Mesa's secrets stirred, the erased refusing to fade. The bikers stood sentinel, engines whispering of storms yet to come. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first hints of false dawn crept over the mesa, turning the sky a bruised purple as Elena Vargas sat cross-legged on the worn linoleum of Haven House's common room. The single bulb hummed overhead, casting her notebook in a pool of yellow light that flickered with the kids' hesitant breaths. Lila's voice, small but steady, filled the space like a confession long held back. "It was after curfew," she said, twisting the bear's ear. "We weren't supposed to be out, but Sophie couldn't sleep. The fence has a loose board, big enough for us to squeeze through." Sophie nodded from her spot on Marlene's lap, the locket glinting as she fiddled with its chain. The air inside carried the faint tang of instant coffee from Jax's thermos, mingling with the earthy residue of desert dust tracked in on boots. Elena scribbled notes, her pen scratching softly, eyes never leaving the girl's face. "And the trucks? Tell me what you remember about the men." Lila swallowed, glancing at the others clustered like shadows. 8-year-old Tommy with his single sock balled in his fist, the twins Mia and Max sharing a drawing of a fractured skyline. 3 vans, black as night, no lights on the front but flashlights sweeping like they were hunting. Crates came out, heavy ones thudding on the gravel. One man, tall with a badge like the deputy's, argued with another in a suit. "The kids at the home, they heard the last drop," the tall one said. The suit laughed cold and said, "Scatter 'em, no loose threads." The words hung, painting pictures in the dim room, silhouettes against the warehouse's rusted walls, the scuffles muffled echoes, carrying on the wind to the fence where wide eyes watched. Marlene leaned against the wall, her folder now passed to Elena, pages whispering as they turned under the journalist's fingers, reports stacked like accusations, dates aligning with town council meetings, names linking private security firms to the mayor's donors, whispers of shipments rerouted from aid routes to shadowed deals. "I called every line," Marlene murmured, her voice raw from the night's vigil. "Child services, the sheriff, even a state hotline. All bounce back with insufficient evidence, but these kids aren't imagining shadows. They saw the erasure start right there." Rourke hovered by the door, his medic bag open on a chair, bandaging a scrape on Tommy's knee from earlier nerves. His hands moved with the precision of old triage tents, steadying the boy as much as the wound. "Breathe easy, kid. Truth's a tough patient, but it heals if you let it speak." Outside, the circle held firm under the paling stars. Hawk paced the gravel perimeter, his shadow long and deliberate, the tremor in his hand a distant memory amid the purpose. The Iron Promise riders had settled into their watch, some leaning on bikes, others sharing quiet words, vests patched with symbols of battles won not with bullets but bonds. Jax passed a water bottle to a windbreaker who'd edged too close, the gesture disarming, pulling the man into a low conversation about old fires fought in the Mesa's dry seasons. "Seen enough blazes to know when one's set to cover tracks," Jax rumbled, his voice carrying just far enough to unsettle the agent barking orders from his truck. The deputy circled Hawk, sweat beading on his brow despite the chill. "You're interfering, Daniels. This could turn ugly. Federal involvement now." Hawk stopped, facing him square, the scent of leather and exhaust sharp between them. "Ugly started 2 weeks ago, when those kids became ghosts in their own story. You gonna tell me you didn't hear the call logs Marlene filed, or is your radio tuned to a different frequency?" The deputy's eyes flicked to the warehouse silhouette on the horizon, a squat bulk against the dawn. Hawk followed the glance, piecing the fragments Rourke had relayed from inside, the argument, the plea cut short, traces of a struggle left in the dust. It mirrored the war's end, when superiors buried reports of misplaced supplies to shield the brass. That dying friend's vow burned fresh, "Don't look away from the erased." Hawk's crew embodied it now. 50 riders a living testament, engines ticking as they cooled, headlights dimmed but vigilant. Radios crackled louder from the trucks, voices overlapping in clipped urgency. "Hold position. Lawyers inbound from the city. No moves till clearance." The agent slammed his door, phone to his ear, his face twisting in the cab's glow. Eleanor emerged briefly from the house, slipping Hawk a nod through the chain of bikers. "It's solid. Names tied to the council. Smuggling ring using the warehouse for rerouted goods. Kids' accounts match anonymous tips I've chased for months." Her words fueled the quiet fire. Inside, the children's whispers grew bolder, Sophie even sketching a crude map of the van's paths on Elena's notepad. Lila watched from the window, the bear forgotten in her lap as the first birds stirred in the creosote. But tension coiled anew as headlights pierced the east, 2 sedans, sleek and official, pulling up behind the trucks. Suits disembarked, briefcases in hand, flanked by more windbreakers. The lead lawyer, a woman with sharp features and a voice like polished steel, approached Hawk directly. "Mr. Daniels, Iron Promise, we represent the Relocation Authority. Step aside. This is a child welfare matter." Hawk didn't budge, his stance a rooted oak. "Welfare don't scatter witnesses. We've got statements, filings, truths here, not in your briefs." Rourke joined him, medic bag slung low. "I've patched enough to know when fear's manufactured. These kids need guardians, not ghosts." The lawyer's eyes narrowed, scanning the ring of riders, the foster home's faint glow. Marlene appeared at the threshold, Elena at her side, the folder now a shared weight. "Take it to court if you must," Marlene said, her tremble gone, replaced by steel. "But not before the light hits it." The suits conferred, phones buzzing with escalating calls. City Hall stirring, a judge roused from sleep. One windbreaker broke ranks, muttering to the deputy about biker interference on record, but Jax's calm presence nearby quelled it. A thermos extended again like an olive branch laced with warning. As the sun crested, gilding the chrome and dust, Hawk felt the shift, a moral tide turning. The children inside pressed to the windows, plastic bags set aside, faces alight with the fragile spark of being seen. Rourke clapped Hawk's shoulder, the old medic's grin faint but real. "Promise held, brother. They're listening now." The standoff stretched into the light, engines silent but souls roaring, the erased voices rising like dawn over Red Mesa. Corruption's shadows recoiled. The chosen family standing as the unbreakable line. In that golden hour, justice whispered its first real breath, promising a reckoning that would echo far beyond the mesa's edge. The sun climbed higher over Red Mesa, its rays slicing through the morning haze like judgment's own blade. Haven House stood bathed in gold, the weathered siding catching light that revealed every crack and scar. Much like the faces peering from its windows, the Iron Promise riders remained a steadfast ring, their Harleys parked in precise formation, chrome accents gleaming as if forged for this very dawn. Hawk leaned against his bike, arms crossed, the faint scent of dew-kissed sagebrush mingling with the oily tang of exhaust. His steel-grey eyes tracked the suits now huddled by the trucks, briefcases open on hoods, papers fluttering in the light breeze. The lead lawyer, Ms. Harlan, paced with clipped steps, her polished heels sinking into the gravel, a stark contrast to the rider's scuffed boots. Inside, Elena Vargas continued her quiet interrogation, the common room now alive with the soft rustle of pages and the children's emerging voices. Tommy, the 8-year-old with the bald sock, pointed to a sketch on Eleanor's notepad, a crude outline of vans and a fence. "That's where we hid," he said, his voice gaining strength under the journalist's steady gaze. The man in the suit pushed the other one, said something about fixing the leak before the little ears catch it. Sophie nodded vigorously, her locket swinging like a pendulum. He had a shiny thing on his belt, like a star, but it wasn't nice. Marlene sat nearby, her hands finally still. The folder's weight lifted as Elena transcribed every fragment. The air hummed with possibility, the single bulb now redundant against the morning light, filtering through thin curtains. Rourke moved among the kids like a gentle shadow, offering water from a canteen and words that bridged the gap between fear and fortitude. "I've seen tougher mornings in the sand," he told Lila, his gravel voice a balm. "You spoke up. That's the real armor." The girl managed a small smile, the stuffed bear tucked beside her as if it too had borne witness. Outside, the deputy's radio spat urgent bursts, but the windbreakers had thinned, some retreating to their vehicles with uneasy glances at the bikers. Jax, ever the anchor, shared a nod with a younger rider named Reyes, who adjusted his vest patch, the broken chain symbol, a reminder of oaths unbroken. Hawk approached Ms. Harlan as she ended a tense call, her phone snapping shut like a trap. "Your relocation smells like a cover," he said, voice low, but carrying the weight of miles ridden. "Kids don't get scattered for budget cuts, not when they've got eyes on your warehouse games." The lawyer's sharp features tightened, but she didn't flinch. "Allegations without proof, Mr. Daniels. Iron Promise isn't licensed for intervention. Step back, or we'll have you for obstruction." Hawk's laugh was a rumble, dry as the mesa. "Proof's in there. Statements from the ones you want gone. We stand till it sees daylight." Behind him, the convoy stirred subtly, engines untouched but presence amplified, a living barrier against the creeping authority. Marlene emerged onto the porch, Elena at her elbow, the journalist clutching her notebook like a talisman. "We've got timelines," Marlene announced, her voice projecting across the gravel. "Calls logged 2 weeks back, matching the kids' night. Warehouse logs show aid trucks rerouted, false manifests, council stamps." The suits froze, whispers rippling among them. The agent from the night before stepped forward, face flushed. "This is harassment. The home's unstable. Structural issues." But his words faltered as Elena held up a photo from her phone. A grainy shot of the warehouse fence, time-stamped, shared anonymously months prior. It aligned too neatly with the children's accounts. Shadows of crates, a scuffle's vague outline, suggesting resistance, not resolution. The deputy shifted, his hand no longer near his holster, but fidgeting with his belt. Hawk caught it, the man's eyes darting to the horizon where the warehouse loomed, a rusting sentinel. "You were on shift that night," Hawk pressed, not accusing but unyielding. "Heard the call about a disturbance? Or did it get quieted before it hit dispatch?" The deputy swallowed, sweat tracing his collar. In the war, Hawk had seen it, the foot soldiers caught in the gears. Loyalty torn between badge and conscience. This man wasn't the architect, just a cog, but his silence fed the machine. Rourke joined the exchange, his medic's bag slung low. "I've treated enough regrets to know when one's brewing. Walk away clean, officer. Let the truth patch this." Tension peaked as another vehicle approached, a dusty sedan from the county seat, bearing a judge's aide with papers in hand. The aide, a wiry man named Ellis, conferred with Harlan, their voices low but urgent. "Emergency stay on relocation," he announced finally, voice amplified by the morning quiet. "Pending review of new evidence. No moves till noon." Relief washed over Marlene's face, a tear tracing her cheek as she gripped the porch rail. Inside, the children cheered softly, plastic bags forgotten on the floor, replaced by shared hugs and the first real laughter since dusk. Lila pressed her forehead to the window, watching Hawk's silhouette against the sun, a guardian etched in light. But Victory's edge sharpened with risk. The agent radioed furiously, demanding escalation, while Harlan's eyes scanned the riders for weakness. "This buys time, not absolution," she warned Hawk. "Your club's history, vigilante runs, won't hold in court." Hawk met her stare, the old promise thrumming in his chest. "Stand for the erased. History's what we make here. Loyalty over badges. You chase shadows, we light the way." Jax distributed coffee to the aide, a gesture that eased the newcomer into Marlene's orbit, where Elena began sharing excerpts. The windbreakers milled, their perimeter dissolved into awkward clusters, the truck's engines coughing to life in retreat. As the sun warmed the dust, Rourke pulled Hawk aside, the two veterans sharing a look heavy with shared scars. "They're cornered, brother, but the big fish, the council ties, they'll bite back." Hawk nodded, feeling the tremor in his hand return, not from age, but the weight of what came next. The foster home pulsed with new life, voices overlapping in plans for the day, stories to solidify, allies to call. Sophie skipped to the door, locket bouncing, and waved at the bikers. "Thank you," she called, her small voice cutting through like dawn's first bird. The iron promise held, not with force but fortitude, engines silent now but ready. Red Mesa's secrets cracked open under the light, the chosen family weaving a net of truth. Hawk inhaled the warming air, sage and steel, knowing this dawn marked not an end, but a deepening vow. Corruption recoiled, but the reckoning rode on the horizon, engines waiting to roar. If this story moved you, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of quiet courage far and wide. The noon sun beat down on Red Mesa like a relentless interrogator, turning the gravel into a shimmering haze that distorted the air around Haven House. Hawk wiped sweat from his brow, the salt stinging the faint scars along his temple, remnants of a shrapnel kiss from years past. The Iron Promise riders had shifted their vigil into a loose perimeter. Some perched on tailgates with water bottles passed hand to hand, the clink of metal echoing softly. Engines sat silent now, but the scent of hot chrome lingered, mixing with the dry earth kicked up by a passing breeze. Inside, the children's voices carried through open windows, fragments of laughter amid the low hum of Elena's recorder, capturing final details. Ms. Harlan, the lead lawyer, stood rigid by her sedan, her briefcase clutched like a shield as she scanned legal pads with a junior associate. The emergency stay had bought breathing room, but her calls had intensified, voices sharp and overlapping on speakerphone. "We need warrants expedited. Frame it as child endangerment by outsiders," she snapped, glancing at the bikers with thinly veiled disdain. The deputy hovered nearby, his uniform wilted, avoiding Hawk's gaze as he fiddled with his radio. Rourke leaned against his Harley, arms crossed over his faded medic patch, watching the suits like a hawk eyeing prey. "They're scrambling," he murmured to Hawk. "But cornered rats bite hardest." Marlene paced the porch, her folder now bolstered by Elena's notes, a growing dossier of timelines and sketches that painted the warehouse night's shadows in stark relief. The kids had added layers, the tall man's plea, "Don't let the little ones carry this," cut short by a shove that left echoes of resistance in the dust. No body found, but the air heavy with finality. Sophie had described the suit's voice, oily and assured, promising clean sweeps to bury loose ends. Tommy's sock, once a talisman of fear, now dangled from his pocket as he helped Lila fold drawings into the file, maps of van routes snaking from the warehouse to council garages. "This proves the connection," Eleanor said, emerging with a fresh printout from her laptop, the paper crisp against the weathered wood. Rerouted aid trucks, false logs stamped by the mayor's office. It's not just smuggling, it's theft from the very programs these kids depend on. Hawk nodded, the weight of the old promise settling deeper in his chest. That dying friend's words, gasped in a blood-soaked tent, had been simple: stand for the erased. Back then, it meant shielding a village from reprisals, reports filed only to vanish in brass hands. Here, it echoed in the children's eyes, Lila's quiet resolve, Sophie's tentative trust. He'd ridden thousands of miles to bury the ghosts, but iron promise had pulled him back, a family forged in chrome and campfires. Jax approached, handing Hawk a sandwich wrapped in foil, the bread still warm from a cooler. "Eat, boss. Dawn's fight needs fuel." The burly ex-firefighter's eyes flicked to the horizon, where dust clouds hinted at approaching vehicles, not friendly ones. The suits conferred urgently as a black SUV crested the rise, tires crunching gravel with authority. It bore no markings, but the tinted windows and reinforced frame screamed private muscle, tied to the security firms named in Marlene's reports. 2 men disembarked, broad-shouldered, windbreakers swapped for tactical vests, eyes scanning the scene like predators assessing a herd. The lead, a scar-faced operative named Vance, strode toward Harlan, ignoring the bikers entirely. "Council sent us. Secure the site. Welfare override pending." His voice was flat, laced with the kind of confidence bought by backroom deals. The deputy straightened, relief flickering in his posture. But Hawk stepped forward, boots deliberate on the sun-baked ground. "This site's secured by truth, not threats," Hawk said, his tone even, the tremor in his hand steady now under purpose's grip. Vance turned, sizing him up with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Bikers playing hero? Step off, or we'll make it official. Trespass, endangerment." Behind him, the second man hovered by the SUV, hand near a concealed bulge that spoke of escalation without words. Rourke moved to flank Hawk, the medic's bag a subtle reminder of lives mended and defended. "We've seen your type in the field," Rourke rumbled, hiding dirt under badges. "These kids aren't your loose ends." Inside, the air shifted as Lila peeked through the curtain, her bear clutched tight. "More bad men," she whispered, drawing the others close. Marlene gathered them, her voice a steady anchor. "The riders are our line. Hold what you know. It's stronger than fear." Elena knelt, recorder running. One more round. The crates, what did they smell like? Tommy wrinkled his nose. "Like chemicals, sharp and wrong, not food or clothes." The fragments wove tighter, pointing to diverted medical supplies, ironic, given Rourke's past, funneled into black market veins by council cronies. Outside, Vance advanced, the SUV's door creaking open to reveal a third figure, a slick council aide, tie loosened, clutching a tablet. "Emergency dispersal order, health code violation," the aide announced, voice amplified by nerves. The windbreakers reformed, emboldened, edging toward the porch. Jax rose from his perch, broad frame blocking their path without a word, while Reyes revved his engine once, a low warning growl that rippled through the convoy. No aggression, just the thunder of unity, chrome flashing in the sun like drawn blades. Hawk faced Vance square, the desert heat pressing between them. You chase ghosts to protect thieves. Those kids saw your cleanup start. Argument at the fence, resistance in the dark. Walk away, or the light hits you first. Vance's scar twisted with a laugh, but uncertainty crept in as Elena slipped out, tablet in hand, mirroring the aids. I've got sources confirming the manifests. Mayor's signature on every false page. This goes public by evening. The aide paled, phone buzzing with frantic texts from City Hall. Harlan interjected, her Polish cracking. Stand down. This escalates to federal if you push. The standoff thickened, the SUV's engine idling like a held breath. Marlene joined the line, folder extended to the aide. Sign for the stay, or explain why witnesses vanish. Inside, Sophie's locket caught a sunbeam, her small hand waving determination through the glass. Rourke clapped Hawk's shoulder, the bond of old wars unspoken but ironclad. The promise pulsed, erased no more, the powerless rising. As the aide hesitated, dust swirled from a new arrival, a state investigator's van, lights off but purposeful, drawn by Elena's earlier tip. The operative paused, radio crackling with retreat orders. Vance shot Hawk a glare laced with promise of return, but the suits yielded ground, vehicles peeling away in a haze of gravel and defeat. The investigator approached Marlene, notebook open. Let's hear it all. Relief bloomed, children's cheers filtering out like dawn's chorus. Hawk exhaled, the sun's zenith marking a pivot. The chosen family stood taller, loyalty's chain unbroken. Red Mesa's shadows shortened, truth's reckoning accelerating. But in the distance, the warehouse loomed, secret stirring for the counterstrike. Engines waited, riders vigilant, the vow riding into the heat of the day. The state investigator's van settled into the dust like a reluctant intruder, its door swinging open to reveal a woman in a crisp blazer, her badge catching the midday glare. Agent Reyes, mid-40s with the no-nonsense poise of someone who'd sifted through too many buried files, stepped out, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the assembled riders and the foster home's sun-warmed facade. The air hummed with the faint buzz of cicadas, underscoring the hush that fell over Haven House as Marlene met her at the porch steps. "Ma'am, Elena Vargas tipped us off," Reyes said, her voice measured, carrying the faint twang of the southern counties. "Irregularities in child services protocols. Mind if I hear the full account?" Marlene nodded, gesturing inside, where the children's faces hovered at the windows, curiosity edging out the morning's relief. Hawk watched from his perch on the Harley, the leather seat warm beneath him, the scent of sun-baked metal rising in waves. The Iron Promise crew had dispersed slightly, forming clusters around coolers and shared smokes, but their vigilance lingered, a subtle shift of weight, a glance toward the retreating SUV's taillights fading down the Mesa road. Rourke sidled up, wiping his hands on a rag from his medic bag, the fabric stained with faint traces of salve from earlier comforts. "She's legit," he murmured, nodding toward Reyes. "Pulled her file in my head, clean, chased corruption cases up north. But those suits, they'll circle back with teeth." Hawk grunted, his scarred knuckles flexing against the handlebars. The old promise thrummed like a distant engine, stand for the erased. It had carried him through foxholes and forgotten patrols, and now it anchored this dusty standoff, binding the club in a web of quiet oaths. Inside, the common room breathed easier under the afternoon light, slanting through the blinds, casting striped patterns on the linoleum scarred by years of small feet. Reyes sat on a folding chair, notebook open, as Lila recounted the warehouse night once more, her words flowing steadier now, the stuffed bear propped beside her like a silent ally. "The vans came slow, no noise but gravel crunching," she said, eyes fixed on the agent's pen. "We hid low, but the voices carried, the tall one with the badge." He grabbed the suit's arm. "This ends the little ones paying for your mess," he said. Then a push, shadows tumbling. After the crate stayed, but the air felt empty. Sophie chimed in from Marlene's side, her locket open to reveal a tiny photo of a smiling woman, perhaps a lost relative, clutched like a fragment of home. They whispered about scattering us next, like we were the problem. Reyes's pen paused, her expression tightening as she cross-referenced Elena's sketches and Marlene's folder. Timelines aligned ruthlessly, the warehouse disturbance logged but dismissed as wildlife interference, aid manifests altered with digital sleight of hand, council signatures looping back to the mayor's inner circle. This suggests institutional cover, Reyes noted, her voice low to shield the younger ears clustered nearby. Tommy piped up, sock forgotten in his pocket, pointing to a drawing of van paths veering toward private lots. They took boxes that smelled like medicine, sharp, like the stuff Rourke used on my knee. The medic, lingering by the door, nodded grimly. In his war days, he'd seen supplies vanish into black holes, leaving the wounded to fate. This echoed it. Diverted relief meant for the Mesa's forgotten, funneled to shadows for profit, the warehouse a nerve center pulsing with deceit. Outside, Jax organized a perimeter check, his burly frame directing Reyes, a younger rider with a firefighter's steady gaze, to scout the fence line. The sun's heat pressed down, turning sweat to salt trails on exposed skin. The distant warehouse, a hazy outline mocking their progress. Hawk dismounted, boots thudding softly, and joined Marlene on the porch as Reyes wrapped her initial interview. We'll secure the home. No relocations till forensics hits the warehouse, the agent promised, pocketing her notes. But expect pushback. The council's got pull. This could drag. Marlene's eyes, lined with the wear of battles won and lost, met Hawk's. You've given us ground to stand on. These kids, their family now pieced together from scraps. He inclined his head, the salt and pepper beard catching a breeze heavy with creosote. Iron promise wasn't blood, but it was chosen, forged in the fire of promises like the one that bound him to this mesa. As Reyes departed, her van kicking up a rooster tail of dust toward the highway, the first counter ripples arrived. A county cruiser idled at the rise, not advancing but watching, its occupant, a fresh-faced deputy, relaying positions via radio. Hawk felt the shift, the air thickening with unspoken threats. Rourke pulled him aside near the bikes, voices low amid the creak of settling leather. That warehouse, it's the key. Kids' descriptions match old runs we've heard whispers of. Rerouted meds hitting street veins. Council skimming aid for kickbacks. The tall man? Likely an insider who cracked, paid for it in the dark. Hawk's jaw set, memories surfacing unbidden, the dying friend's gasp in the tent. Don't let them erase us. A vow that had simmered through decades of road and regret. Redemption wasn't a blaze, it was this steady burn, standing sentinel for the small against the machine. Elena lingered inside, coordinating with a contact on her phone, her voice an urgent murmur about leaks to the press. The children, emboldened, began a makeshift game in the yard, drawing more maps on scrap paper, laughter punctuating the tension like sparks. Lila approached Hawk through the gate, bear in tow. "You won't let them take us?" she asked, voice a thread of trust. He knelt to her level, the gravel biting his knees, and placed a calloused hand on her shoulder. "Not while we ride, promise." The word hung, echoing his own buried oath, a bridge across generations of guarded silences. But as the sun arced toward late afternoon, casting long shadows that clawed at the home's foundation, a low rumble echoed from the east. Not Harleys, but heavier trucks, unmarked and purposeful, cresting the mesa like storm clouds gathering. The deputy and the cruiser straightened, radio alive. Vance's SUV trailed them, scar-faced and unyielding, the private muscle returning with reinforcements. Harlan's sedan followed, Briefcases swapped for files thick with countersuits. The air crackled, the scent of impending rain mixing with exhaust as the convoy halted short of the perimeter. Vance dismounted first, megaphone in hand. "Official lockdown. Evidence tampering suspected. Clear the site." Hawk rose, signaling the riders to reform the line. Engines stirring to life with a collective growl held in check. Rourke shouldered his bag, eyes on the children herded back inside by Marlene. Jax cracked his knuckles subtly, Reyes revving once in solidarity. The iron promise swelled, chrome barriers against the tide, loyalty's roar building beneath the surface. Elena dashed out, phone recording, capturing the standoff's rebirth. Layla watched from the window, fist clenched around the bear as Hawk stepped forward, the promise igniting like dawn's first light, unbreakable, unyielding. The erased would not fade. The reckoning accelerated, engines poised for the storm's heart. The late afternoon sun hung low over Red Mesa, casting elongated shadows that stretched like fingers across the gravel lot of Haven House. Dust devils swirled in the heat, carrying the sharp tang of impending rain mixed with the oily residue of idling engines. Hawk stood at the forefront of the iron promise line, his boots planted firm, the faint tremor in his left hand steadied by the grip on his handlebars. The unmarked trucks formed a hulking barrier at the rise, their grills gleaming menacingly, while Vance's SUV idled behind like a predator's flank. The scar-faced operative stepped forward again, megaphone amplifying his bark over the low hum of the bikers' Harleys. "Last warning, clear out. This is secured perimeter. Any resistance, and your accessories." The riders didn't flinch. Jax shifted his weight, broad shoulders squared, while Reyes killed his engine with a deliberate click, the silence amplifying the tension. Rourke slung his medic bag higher, eyes locked on the children now clustered at the windows, their small faces pale against the glass. Lila's hand pressed flat to the pane, the stuffed bear forgotten on the sill inside, as Marlene herded the younger ones back from the door. Elena Vargas hovered nearby, phone raised, live-streaming the confrontation to her network, the digital glow reflecting in her determined eyes. "This is public now," she called out, voice cutting through the standoff. "Viewers watching, Council's playbook exposed." Hawk raised a hand, signaling calm, his salt and pepper beard catching the wind as he stepped closer to Vance. The air between them crackled, heavy with the scent of hot rubber and unspoken threats. "You build walls to hide rot," Hawk said, his voice a gravel rumble carrying across the lot. "But these kids saw through yours, warehouse shadows, stolen aid, your cleanup's unraveling." Vance's scar twisted in a sneer, but his eyes flicked to the state investigator's van, still parked nearby, Agent Reyes now on her radio, coordinating with unseen reinforcements. The aide from the council fidgeted by the SUV, tablet trembling in his grip as Harlan barked orders to hold position. Inside, the common room pulsed with hushed urgency. Sophie clutched her locket, whispering to Tommy, "They can't take us if everyone's watching." Marlene knelt beside them, her voice a steady thread. "The riders are our shield. Hold your stories tight. They're the light breaking this dark." The folder lay open on the table, pages annotated with Eleanor's connections. Manifests linking the mayor's donors to black market routes, the tall man's plea echoing in sketched timelines. A whistleblower silenced in the gravel, traces of struggle buried under false reports. Reyes had promised forensics teams en route, but this resurgence tested the fragile stay, the suits gambling on intimidation to scatter the witnesses before the net closed. Outside, the truck's doors creaked open, disgorging more windbreakers, 6 in total, vests bulging with concealed intent, forming a wedge toward the porch. The deputy from the cruiser joined them, his earlier reluctance hardening into compliance, radio clipped silent. Jax moved first, not charging but positioning his bulk to block the path, the ex-firefighter's calm a wall of its own. "Easy now," he rumbled, hands open but unyielding. "No need for rough roads here." Reyes flanked him, the younger rider's engine coughing back to life in a warning purr, joined by a chorus from the convoy, 50 Harleys sinking into a thunderous idling that vibrated the ground, shaking loose pebbles like an earthquake held in check. Vance advanced, hand hovering near his vest, but Hawk's presence rooted him short. "Iron promise don't break for bullies," Hawk continued, eyes steel grey and unblinking. "We stand for the erased. Promise from a brother lost in the dust, same as your ghosts at the warehouse." The words landed like a gauntlet, stirring something in the deputy, whose gaze dropped to the horizon where the warehouse squatted, its rusted silhouette a confession in iron. Rourke stepped up beside Hawk, the old medic's voice low but piercing. "I've mended enough to spot a bleed. Your boss's game, diverting meds from folks like these kids. It's a wound that festers. Walk, or it claims you too." The wedge faltered as sirens wailed distant, growing from the highway. County units, but flanked by federal markers. Reyes's call pulling strings from the capital. Harlan's phone erupted in vibrations, her face draining as she scanned the screen. "Stand down, all units," she hissed into her earpiece, the polish fracturing into panic. Vance hesitated, megaphone lowering. As the first patrol cars crested the rise, lights flashing in authoritative blues. The trucks reversed grudgingly, gravel spraying in defeat, the windbreakers melting back into their vehicles. The aide bolted to his sedan, tires spinning as he fled, leaving dust clouds that choked the air like retreating smoke. Agent Reyes emerged from her van, clipboard raised. "Federal oversight now. Warehouse sealed. All parties detained for questioning." She nodded to Hawk, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Your hold bought the time. Statements secured. The kids' accounts seal it." Marlene rushed out, enveloping Lila in a hug as the girl burst through the door, Sophie and Tommy trailing, their plastic bags abandoned inside like shed fears. The children swarmed the riders, small hands touching vests and chrome, laughter bubbling amid tears. Leela looked up at Hawk, eyes shining. "You kept the promise." He knelt, the desert wind whispering through his beard, and ruffled her hair gently. "We all did. Family's what you fight for." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the mesa in hues of amber and resolve, Elena pocketed her phone, the stream's comments flooding with support, voices from across the miles demanding justice. Rourke clapped Hawk's shoulder, the two veterans sharing a nod heavy with closure, the old war's ghosts laid quieter by this victory. The iron promise mounted up slowly, engines roaring to life not in threat, but triumph. A convoy forming to escort the investigators' team to the warehouse. Marlene waved from the porch, the foster home aglow, its walls no longer a fragile outpost, but a bastion of truth. Hawk throttled his Harley last, the vibration sinking with his pulse, the promise from a dying friend fulfilled in the dust of Red Mesa. Corruption's web tore under the weight of loyalty. The erased voices amplified into a chorus that echoed far beyond the horizon. Riders rolled out, chrome catching the fading light, leaving Haven House to heal under stars emerging like witnesses to redemption. The road called, but the vow rode eternal. Honor in the silence, family in the thunder, justice claimed not by force but by the unyielding stand of the chosen. Thank you for riding this road with us to the end. If tales of unbreakable promises and quiet courage touch your soul, subscribe for more stories from the Iron Promise universe, where the heart's oath outlasts the storm.